Welcome back to Basketball Coaches of Canada podcast, episode 2. For our guest today, we have Jason Peters. Jason is a coach and Indigenous sport leader for 33 years now and has been named the head coach of UConn's U18 women's program that will be attending the 2022 Canada Games. Not only that, Jason will be making history being the first Indigenous basketball coach in the Canada Games. Jason, a coach and an incredible sport leader advancing the game of basketball in Canada, but he is also an author. Be sure to check out his novel called Aboriginal Sport Heroes, Atlantic Canada. Jason, how are you doing today?
Doing very well, thank you very much.
Good. Thank you for coming on and chatting with me.
Not a problem.
All right. Well, let's jump right into it. So, Coach Peters, not only have you accumulated great experiences in coaching and are still continuing today, you're also a national coaching certification program coach developer. And I know through the Aboriginal Sports Circle, there are 3 modules that were created as a training tool. So do you mind elaborating on your role as the coach developer, but also how these 3 modules complement the NCCP certification process?
Sure, absolutely. I guess I've been a coach developer for almost 15 years now. I like giving back, and I think being a coach developer is a nice way, because this way you can, in a way, help mentor the next generation of coaches, and especially through the National Coaching Certification Program. And over the last 15 years or so, we've had the Aboriginal Coaching Module, which is a great addition or a great supplement. I think people get confused when they hear Aboriginal Coaching Module. They think it's simply for Aboriginal coaches, but it's for everybody. It's for any coach that may potentially coach an Aboriginal athlete over their career. And let's be honest, with the new demographics, the numbers, there's over 1.1 million Indigenous people in Canada. So there's a fair chance that no matter where you coach, you may actually have an Indigenous athlete that you may be coaching, and you probably may not even recognize that. As for the ACM, yes, there's 3 modules. Normally it takes about 8 hours to complete. The first one is based on holistic coaching. When it comes to holistic coaching, I think Indigenous people look at coaching or look at the athlete differently. For many, many years, as a coach, coaches look at the physical. They want their athlete to be bigger, stronger, faster. And sometimes, they want to win. But we look at it differently. So yes, the physical is one part of it, but we also have the mental, we have the spiritual and the cultural, because we feel that there's 4 quadrants to the athlete. And once again, and it's now in the mainstream now also, we want to develop future leaders and develop the whole person rather than just simply an athlete.
For sure.
So the second module is on racism. Because it doesn't matter where we are today. There's blatant and sometimes there's overt racism that we really don't recognize, and we talk about it from an Indigenous perspective. And I think that's really powerful, because and it's not just in the sport of basketball, it's happening everywhere, and it's happening in all corners of Canada that we see racism. I mean, working in Nova Scotia now, in the sport of hockey, there seems to be quite a bit of racism in some of the smaller communities against Indigenous and some Black athletes. And unfortunately, that's not something we should have to face. We should simply be able to go out there and compete and have fun, right? And the third module is on health, because there's many health concerns that First Nations and Indigenous people have that others really don't focus on. I guess excuse me, I have a bit of a dry cough.
It's okay.
I was going to say type 2 diabetes. It's very big in the First Nation community. For years as coaches, we've learned, especially in tournaments, for rest and regeneration, to give our athletes maybe milk or chocolate milk in between. If we play a game in a tournament, have a game off, and we go to play again, and maybe a banana, something like this. And that sounds fine, but the large majority of Indigenous athletes are lactose intolerant. So if you give them milk or chocolate milk, if you know anything about the stomach, it does very, very bad things. And in the sport of basketball, it's very hard to, and I joke about this, but it's very hard to pull a full court press on when you have diarrhea. So, and you can't substitute for that. So I guess that's just jokingly, but there's multiple, I guess, healthcare concerns or health concerns with Indigenous athletes. And a lot of people also don't realize, like, we have Canada's food guide, but we also have an Indigenous food guide here in Canada. And a lot of people don't know that. So it's something that should be known a little bit more, and coaches should sort of focus on it, because once again, if you're doing dietary planning and things like this, especially in high performance sports, it's good to know that some of your athletes have that background.
Yeah, for sure. We want to help our athletes in any way possible. But thank you for explaining all of that. I definitely just learned a lot in those couple of minutes. But as we always talk about focusing on the physical and the mental, it's nice that you brought up the spiritual and the cultural aspect as well. Especially as you say, there are 1.1 million Aboriginal individuals, and so you're definitely going to come across one as a coach, as a coach for any sport. So thank you for explaining that. That is definitely a great way to start learning.
I think just before we go on, I just wanted to mention that. So in Canada, there's 640 different First Nations communities. That's not including your Métis or your Inuit or Innu people. And in saying that, there's 52 different languages. So, a lot of people seem to paint people over with the same brush. Oh, well, you're Indigenous, or you're First Nations, or you're Inuit, or you're Métis. And that's fine. But we're also forgetting that not every community is the same. We're very different. Now, no matter where you're from, whether it be Atlantic Canada, like your Moncton, St. John, Fredericton, Halifax, are very different cities, and not everybody's the same. So it's very much the same across Canada. You can't compare Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. They're very different, very different backgrounds, very different communities.
Exactly. And thank you for bringing up that point, because the next question kind of piggybacks off that really well. So the coaching program with ASC has been expanded to include non-Aboriginal coaches working with Indigenous communities and with Indigenous people. So what adjustments would a coach have to make to be successful coaching in the Indigenous cultural environment?
That is a great question. I think as coaches, many times we're natural leaders, so we think, right or wrong, that we know the sport, so we know what's best. The problem is when going into a different community or a different, I guess, culture, or a First Nation community, for instance, their ways are very different. Like, many of the ways in Canada are very European based. So even though people aren't from a different race, but they're just from a different culture, here they're very much from a different race. So even though, like I said, once again, the way we do things. So for instance, if you're going into a First Nation community, who do you talk to? How do you start a basketball program or a hockey program? First of all, and it's very different in every community. Do you go to the recreation department? Is that your first point of contact? Is the band council or your First Nation chief and council, are they your first point of contact? Is it the community itself? Sometimes they'll want to have a community meeting and get to know you a little bit. Or maybe they'll send you to the youth committee, or maybe they'll send you to the elders. Or maybe they'll just have, like I said, a big meeting, and they'll say, okay, here's Brooklyn. What do you want to offer? Because there's been, in some parts of Canada, relatively negative working relationship between non-Indigenous people and Indigenous people. It's really important for First Nations people or Indigenous people to trust. And the way they trust you is they need to see your face. They need you to come around the community a little bit more and extend yourself. Because what happens in many times, it's like doing business. In the non-Indigenous world, I can show you a PowerPoint, you could be sold, we can shake hands and sign the contract right there. But in many traditional First Nations communities, that's not the way it works. It's, well, yeah, we're interested, but during the first meeting, I don't want to see a PowerPoint. I don't want to see this. I don't want to see that. I want to sit down and have a conversation with Brooklyn and get to know her. Over a Starbucks or a Timmy's or whatever else. Because until I know you, why would I want what you, how do I know you're a quality individual that I want to bring into my community and let you coach our youth? So once again, there's a bit of a time component, and I think that's really important because many times, like I said, we don't just trust right off the bat. We want to have that relationship. And relationship building, it doesn't matter if it's speed dating or if it's coaching or whatever else. It's very important that you're able to connect with people.
Oh, for sure. Having someone come into the community and wanting to work with you, but also the youth, you have to trust them. And that is a process. And it just seems that this is a very thorough process. And I admire that completely. You want to keep everyone safe.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, and I bet out of your 2 podcasts here, that's the first time you've heard somebody use the term speed dating. So there, you know.
Hey, I might have heard it once or twice before.
Hopefully not.
But I like the analogy.
Hopefully not in one of these podcasts.
Yeah. No, definitely. This is the first for sure in one of the podcasts talking about speed dating, but that's okay. Definitely a great concept to bring into it to compare. But yeah, thank you so much for explaining that. I definitely admire the thorough process of ensuring that anyone coming in within the community can be trusted for sure with all stakeholders and with the youth.
And I think, sorry, just to expand on it, I think it's just another level of due diligence, because many times as parents, if we sign our child up for a sporting program, we assume, and it's an assumption, that they have gone through some sort of a criminal background check or a vulnerable sector check. And believe it or not, sometimes they don't. So this is just an added precaution, I guess. So I think it's more the old way of doing things, and I kind of admire that.
Oh, for sure. They're spending such a great amount of time with their coaches for practices, for games. They're looking up to their coaches to lead them. So it's important to be able to trust for sure. So I'm sure the parents also really appreciate this process as well. Mm-hmm. So looking more into your experiences and your successes, this year you've been named the head coach for the U18 Yukon women's basketball team that's going to the Canada Games. So first of all, congratulations. That's absolutely amazing and well-deserved.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be honest. I think, so we start our ID camp this Saturday, but this would be my 4th Canada Games, and there's something about multi-sport games. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you've ever had a chance, I've been to 4 Canada Games and a number of North American Indigenous games, and it always brings a tear to my eye, the opening ceremony. I'm excited. I think sometimes at 49 years old, I'm more excited than the athletes, you know, and I build it up and I'm just shaking and they're just like, okay, coach, calm down. But you just get wired for things like this, especially since the Olympics are going on. You know, I mean, it's very similar.
Oh, for sure. It's an amazing time, and it just comes from experience and wisdom. You just truly understand what's going on a deeper root level. So looking through your coaching experiences, what are some key factors that helped you earn this role?
Whew. Wow. I think perseverance. I think I've always tried to push the envelope. Sometimes people haven't necessarily liked that about me, but I think being Indigenous, there were a lot of times when there weren't programs for us. We've always had to create our own parallel system. I think I was fortunate in a way. I did grow up off reserve, but I've been able to walk the 2 worlds quite well. I've been able to work in the Indigenous world as a Mi'kmaq, but also in the non-Indigenous world. So I think that's really helped. One of the other things is I have a huge fear of failure. And I know people judge failure in different ways, but I think, you know, I'm going to try. I try my utmost. I mean, will my team be the best? Who's to say when it comes to Canada Games? I mean, it's obviously an uphill battle, just knowing that we may only have 20 athletes out to try it for the team, where you have Saskatchewan and New Brunswick and Ontario, which may have 300. 500, you know, so obviously we realize there's a challenge. So going to the games before, I realized that you have to let the athletes enjoy the experience. Very few athletes get to go to two Canada games. Most of the time, it's a one-shot deal. So really, one of the things I want to do, and I talked to my assistant coach about this last night. I said, we want to make sure it's an outstanding experience being part of the team, and we help to create leaders. Obviously, we're in deep. We know what we are, but we also want to make sure that all of our players have a fantastic experience. So one of the things the coaching staff and I have agreed on is we're going to play everybody. It's not going to be one of those things where we have our 8 best and everybody else sort of watches. Everybody's going to play, and they're all going to play pretty much equally. It's going to be like a hockey bench, but we want to play at a high level, a quick level, but have some fun. And I think just going back, I've played multiple sports, and as provincial and Atlantic, and sometimes many times went to nationals. And I've been able to surround myself with good people. I've had great coaches. This is why I'm still coaching. I've learned from them. I've had in sport, I have great mentors. And I've learned so much. One of the things, one of the Indigenous teachings that I always take, really play close to my heart is listening. As a coach, many of us talk, and sometimes we talk so much we put our athletes to sleep. They just want to train, or they want a ball in their hand, or whatever. So I listen a lot, and I try to learn from both, other coaches and my athletes. So I think that's the biggest thing that I've taken. But once again, it's just the longer you're in this, the racket, I guess, or the longer you're coaching, you learn a lot. And I've seen basketball change in the last 30 years so much. It's now, with the European style and the international style. I mean, no longer do you just walk the ball up the court and give it to the big and let them shoot. Now it's, all 4 players on all 5 players on the court. They can all pass, they can all shoot, they can defend, they can do everything. And that's what's so amazing about basketball, right? It's now, it's not a sport, it's not a specialty sport. It's very, you can have many skills and still be very successful.
For sure. I like the point of active listening, because I truly believe any person you meet, you can learn something from them. So whether that's your assistant coach or your players, listening to what maybe they want to work on or they're worried about. As you mentioned, that you're afraid of failure, but your perseverance pushes you every single day. And as you lead that way, your players will follow. So I think that's truly important as well.
Well, in 33 years, I've coached one men's team, and it was so stressful for me. Men in basketball just have a different mentality. They know they're going to take the shot as they're driving to the gym. I find females work the ball better. They really look for that open shot, and I think they come together a lot better. Yeah, and like I said, I've always enjoyed coaching females. So, and I hope to continue as long as I can, because I really enjoy the relationships that you create.
For sure. Definitely can be a different team dynamic, for sure.
Absolutely.
But I also appreciated the point you made a couple minutes ago about having fun. We can have a very set goal, but not realizing where we are in the moment. We're surrounded by amazing coaches and athletes, and really just taking in that moment and having fun. So I'm glad that you mentioned that as well, because that's truly important.
The F word, fun, love it. Yep.
Yes, exactly. So you've accomplished so much, as we've talked about, but specifically this year, you've been inducted into the inaugural 2022 North American Indigenous Athletics Hall of Fame, and will be the first Indigenous basketball coach in the Canada Games. How are you feeling this moment? What does this all mean to you?
Having that fear of failure, I don't know how to celebrate my successes. All of a sudden, I'm presented with this, and I'm excited, but I'm thinking, why did I deserve it? I always bring it back to that. Being Mi'kmaq, being Indigenous, I'm a bit of a storyteller. I'm going to tell you a very quick story. Back a number of years ago, I was I received a phone call. I was at work and I received this phone call, and it was from VANOC, the Vancouver Olympic Committee. And they said, "Well, Jason, you've been nominated and successfully nominated as an Olympic torchbearer for the 2010 Olympic Games." For 30 seconds, I was beaming. Still on the phone, they're talking. All I'm hearing is honk, 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 honk. I'm just excited. And then it hits, because at the time I was about 375 pounds, and I have dropped quite a bit of weight since then. And the first thing to go through my mind was, how far do I have to run? Because I was really, really worried. I said, because what happens if I die of a massive coronary and the flame doesn't make it? Does the Olympics even happen? And they laughed. But that night I went out, started walking, and I've gotten into a lot better shape, which is good. But I guess once I obtain a goal, I just move on to the next one. But yeah, being a two-time Hall of Famer, I mean, it's amazing. I still feel like I'm 18 though, so it still hasn't sunk in. And I'm sure, this one is, I mean, this is the first of its kind, being a North America wide Indigenous. So, I mean, Hall of Fame. So it's amazing, but I don't feel like I'm done yet. So I think I'll probably celebrate when I retire or something like that. But yeah, and going to Canada Games again, I've always gone as a mission staff member or an assistant coach. So this is the first time as a head coach, and this is so exciting for me. Just be able to coach at that level. I mean, I realize I'll probably never coach Canada, but coaching at Canada Games is a huge thing. And it doesn't matter which contingent I coach for. It's always a big thing. It's a huge level of commitment. And I don't think people sometimes realize it. I think they think of the coach back in the 70s, 60s, 50s, where you went out for a couple hours, screamed at some youth to do this and work on that, and then you left. But now coaching has changed so much. I mean, I probably put 2 or 3 hours in of study for every hour on court. So like I said, the game has progressed a lot, and that's what I find fascinating about it. And even as a volunteer coach, it is almost a full-time profession.
Oh, for sure. It takes a lot of time, hours, studying film, studying your practices, your games, what to improve on, what we did well. So it definitely adds up. But your perseverance has clearly paid off, and we should definitely find a way to celebrate this, because you definitely deserve to be celebrated as well. But I will tell you, my first question would be, how far am I running? Just the same, just in case. My stamina is no longer the same as when I was playing basketball. So that would be my first question too.
Well, when I found it was 200 meters, that night I had a pair of, at the time, Nike shoes with the chips in them, so you could actually figure out how far 200 meters was. So I marked it off, and I just started walking 200 meters, just to make sure. Yeah. And then, you eventually start speed walking and then jogging. And yeah, so it was something special.
For sure. You started training right away. I like it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I didn't want to embarrass myself. That's why.
No, yeah, that's understandable. I get it. So a coach developer, a champion, current inductee, and also an author. Could you tell us about the novel you wrote and perhaps what inspired you to create it?
Absolutely. So at the time I was, just before that, I was working for, I was a sport consultant with the government of New Brunswick. I worked with the First Nations, the 15 First Nations communities, and I was seconded from my job with Aboriginal Affairs. So it was supposed to be a year secondment. I ended up with Wellness, Culture, and Sport at the time. They changed their name, as governments do, departments do, but I was there for 4 years. And after the 4th year, it was coming to an end, and I didn't want to go directly back to Aboriginal Affairs. I thought, I've learned so much. I think I'm going to write a book. And some people thought, okay, well, that's great. Who's going to illustrate the pop-ups? So I said, no, it's going to be an actual book. So what happened was, just through my relationships, I met or knew 5 Indigenous sport heroes from Atlantic Canada. So the book was called Indigenous Sport Heroes, or Indigenous Sport Heroes Atlantic Canada. And I wrote their stories because what I found was we had some people that were amazing athletes, not just in Indigenous communities, but in the mainstream. And nobody really knew about them. And it was just amazing. One of the individuals was a female from Nova Scotia. She was two-time world Taekwondo champion. From a very small First Nation, about 5,000 people, but a fair-sized First Nation community. But who would think of that? Out of New Brunswick, out of Fredericton, there were two quarterbacks. One went to the Vanier Cup, and one just fell short. So they went all the way through not just high school football, but they went to university to continue their careers. Then I had one individual. It was his sport administration background. He became the president of the Aboriginal Sports Circle, and he's a really good friend. So people like this, and one, of course, the other one was a hockey player. Grew up, and he paralleled and played against Sidney Crosby all the way up. And he went to the Quebec Major Junior and played for Ted Nolan, who's a famous Indigenous coach. When he played for the Moncton Wildcats. So I just think, telling these stories, it's amazing, because what it did for me was I wanted to write a book, probably middle school or junior high level, for Indigenous youth, because I wanted to show them that these people that they're looking at and they're thinking, wow, how did they do that? Well, they came from the same community, the same environment, the same situation that you came from. And they made it. And that's what it's all about. Like, a lot of people say, wow, it's a sport book. No. It's it's a story of perseverance. It's a story of, if you want it to happen, you can make it happen. These individuals just simply used sport as the vehicle. So I think that's where it's unique. Like, for me, it's not a sport book, even though it's based in it. It's really, like I said, it's how it's to show the youth that, once again, you may come from a really poor environment. You may not have the greatest support system in the world, or this or that, but you can still do it. If you're focused and you put the work in, it will be worth it.
For sure. It sounds like a very motivational novel. I'll have to read it. But I appreciate that as well, because sport is amazing. Sport can be used solely to be active, to meet people, or just to play the sport you love, but it can also help you in so many different aspects. The life skills you learn from sport is incredible. So that's really great that you touched upon it, and there's more to it than just simply the game.
Well, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so last question I have for you. With all your experiences and the many stakeholders you've interacted with, you've acquired such great knowledge and wisdom. So what is some advice you would give to upcoming sport leaders and coaches?
Oh, that's a stumper. Just give me a second.
Take your time.
That's a great one. I guess it's the old phrase, never judge a book by its cover. Just because, as a coach, we're looking for, the perfect athlete. We're looking for this, that. But what we forget is sometimes there's other attributes that make them the perfect athlete. And I guess a good example is sometimes you coach an athlete that's amazing, but they really don't have the drive. Like, that when they go home, they're not dribbling a basketball up and down the street, or to school in the morning and to school, to home in the afternoon, or they're out shooting or things like this. They're just a sort of a God-given athlete. I prefer the athletes that are the fringe athletes, but work their butt off. And I'll tell you, I had this conversation last night with one of my coaches. I said, I always like, and like I said, I've always coached pretty much females. I even coached female football at one time. So for me, it's the ones that they'll dig for the ball. Like, when the ball hits the floor, in a basketball game. They hit the deck like they're a rugby player. That's what I like. It's that grit. And they're the ones that will earn more playing time with me just because you can tell they're giving their all, right? I mean, yeah, everybody likes to see the player that puts up 30 or 40 points. And that's fantastic. But a lot of reasons they're putting up the 30 or 40 points is because of the defensive grit or the rebound at the other end, right? The steal or whatever it is. So, yeah, for me, it's never judge a book by its cover and give people a chance. I remember, and this is, people thought I was crazy. And if I was on the outside looking in, I agree. I coached at a middle school in St. John, New Brunswick called, it was Bayside Middle School. And we had almost 100 girls come out for the team. The first year I coached there, we barely were able to put a team together. But a few years later, we made it the team to be on. And we had almost 100 girls out. So I looked at my two assistant coaches and said, I don't know what to do. Like, there's so many kids in the gym. What do we do? So we decided to do a bit of a conditioning practice. And luckily, the next practice, about 16 girls came back. Oh, no, sorry. There were 17 girls come back. So you know what we did? We took them all. And people said, wow, like 12 is a lot of basketball players. Sometimes teams take 15, but 17. And we rotated them in like a hockey bench. Minute and a half sub, minute and a half on sub. And we ended up winning the provincial title that year. And it was so much fun. Everybody played. We didn't really have, we had some really good talent, but once again, our number one player to our 17th player all played equal. And knowing that we went to provincials and we won, and we won relatively handily, it was just, it really showed the girls that it could be something special, and you don't have to play by the rules all the time. You don't have to play by the rules of, oh, you can only have 12 players and you only play maybe 8 or 10 of them during the game. So I was crazy. My assistant coaches and I took the 17 players, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun, and I wish I could have some times like that back. So I'm hoping to hopefully, may not win Canada Games, but I'm hoping to replicate that in some way this summer.
Hey, anything is possible. You never know.
There you go.
Your perseverance could very well continue on through and take you to the top. But I like that you said to give everyone a chance, because you gave every single person on the team a chance. They played, and look how far you made it. So that's super wonderful to hear. And then just touching on looking at athletes, you want someone who's going to give their all 100% of the time. And it's true. And it also comes down to teamwork. Those same people will work really well with the team. And it isn't so much about their individual performance, but rather a collective. And just like the great Michael Jordan said, talent can win games, but teamwork wins championship. And that's exactly what you did with your team as well. So all of that sounds amazing, and such wonderful advice too.
Well, thank you very much.
No problem. Well, Coach Peters, it's been so lovely chatting with you some more. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about your experiences and all your wonderful knowledge.
Well, thank you very much, Brooklyn. I really appreciated the opportunity to share. Thank you.
No problem. You have a great rest of your night.
Okay, you too. Thank you.